As you know by now, the planet is getting hotter every year. So today, we're going to be talking about carbon offsets. I'm sure you have probably seen this meme, or this meme, or even this one. And let's admit it, they are pretty funny. Because yes, this is what everyone wants to see after the tragic ending of Titanic. Rose. It is now clear to the scientific community that the planet is not doing so great. CO2 levels keep on rising, and yet we have so many conferences and agreements promising to fix it all up. Yet, the curve of emissions only keeps on going on one direction. Not you guys. Let's now introduce to you this random guy. Huh? He seems so familiar. Whatever, what's up? I wanna go to Australia and hug some koalas. You do know that you shouldn't do that, right? I am not going to Australia and I'm definitely not going to hug some koalas. So be cool. Anyway, you're at least offsetting your footprint, right? Offset what? What is that? A carbon offset is a certificate you can buy to cancel out your footprint. Oh, I didn't know that. I'm definitely going to do that right now. What you're seeing here right now is one of Ryanair's green promises. However, they didn't follow through with the plan because they realized that even if they did, the impact of these emission reductions will only account for 0.01% of their total emissions. In a nutshell, companies can claim instant emission reductions through the purchase of carbon offsets, without having to do any of the proper work. Does it sound too good to be true? Then maybe that might be the case. Now let's do a quick recap on recent history so we can understand how we got to this point and where this concept is even coming from. Towards the end of the 1980s, America had a problem. See, for years, its power stations have been emitting large amounts of sulfur dioxide, which was falling back to Earth as acid rain, causing harm to plants, aquatic animals, and infrastructure. And there were no incentives for the power plants to stop emitting these emissions. If you're wondering how bad this was, let's just say even The Simpsons made an episode on it. Play it!
Weather warnings and acid rain alert is in effect.
I'm stinging!
Good Lord, acid rain! The TV!
See, the American government launched an experiment to force polluters to pay for their emissions by establishing a new climate market, governed by a system called cap and trade. 8 years later, acid rain levels over large regions of Eastern America had fallen by 20%, and a new way of cutting emissions was born. In 1997, the International Climate Change Treaty, also known as the Kyoto Protocol, suggested applying the same concept to carbon. And in the following years, we saw different countries setting up their markets. The way it works is that governments set a cap on the amount of CO2 emissions that can be emitted by an industry. It then splits the cap into permits and either gives or sells these permits to firms. If a company doesn't use up all of its allowances, it can then sell what it doesn't need. Or if it needs more permits, it can buy them from other players. Every year, the cap gets stricter and the shrinking pool of permits get more expensive. Or well, that's the general idea on how they should work. However, there's a trick, because there are two very different types of carbon. On one hand, you got carbon fuels that are these deposits that are locked underground for millions and millions of years. And on the other hand, you have biological carbon, which is this more dynamic carbon that floats around trees, vegetation, and oceans. Now, what is fundamental in the climate crisis is the unlocking of fossil carbon deposits that took millions of years to be created that are now being burned out in the shape of petroleum, gas, or coal on a massive scale and in a short period of time. This creates an impossible imbalance in the Earth's capacity to deal with it, to absorb it, and to regulate it. See, you cannot swap carbon that's been part of the combustion process of fossil fuels for above-ground carbon in the biosphere. They are separate entities, but the market system doesn't differentiate that. They package it together, so we are being scammed right now. So, as long as big companies can look good on paper, it doesn't really matter to them where this molecule is coming from, when it was done, or how long it was in the atmosphere. What matters is that the polluter has some accounting sheet with some numbers where it says how many molecules they are emitting. On the other side, the offset project also has an accounting sheet where they say how many CO2 molecules they are absorbing or reducing or avoiding emitting, and therefore this trading can happen. So today, companies are focusing mostly on compensating their emissions but not so much on reducing them. So basically, you pollute and then you pay somebody else to clean up your mess by either planting a tree, taking care of a tree, or investing into renewable energies. However, trees can burn, and this is actually something that we see a lot today due to climate change. And when they do, they release back into the atmosphere all the carbon that they already sequester. And just in case you're wondering what is the correlation between trees and carbon, let's just say that around 50% of a tree's weight, it is carbon. And you know, one thing that amazes me is that one Stanford study compared carbon offsets to church indulgences, which in simple terms, it means that you can pay the church so they can forgive your sins. I don't know if this is the best way to avoid going to hell, but I can guarantee you this is not the best way to reduce emissions. And of course, you have probably seen by now every major politician or CEO making promises on working towards net zero emissions.
Net zero emissions.
Europe will be the world's first climate-neutral continent by 2050.
2030 tak net zero.
To meet the most ambitious goals of the Paris Agreement, change needs to happen faster. Which is why Shell's target is to become a net zero emissions energy business by 2050 or sooner.
I just think it's too funny to see Shell make such a claim when in 1991 they produced the following video. I kid you not.
These models contain many uncertainties, but they forecast that by 2050, global mean temperature could have increased by at least 1.5 degrees, possibly near 4.
And you know what? We are not doing so great. Just look at this chart. Almost half of all humankind greenhouse emissions, they have taken place in the past 3 decades, meaning since 1990s. What have we done? But hey, still, just in case there's some confusion still on how carbon offsets work, here you have another video paid by another big oil company. Let's take a look.
I've been driving around and generating 3 tons of carbon dioxide, which of course I've released into the atmosphere to join all the rest of the greenhouse gases that are already up there. Now, imagine that miles away, maybe on the other side of the world, somebody else takes 3 tons of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So what's happened? 3 tons in, 3 tons out, result in 0. No change in the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. It's an idea called carbon offsetting.
This video is so great though, I just love the values and the simple mathematics. But offsetting can be hard to navigate. So let's take a deep dive at the carbon offsetting triangle for theoretical effective offsets. It makes intuitive sense, for example, that a proper carbon offset must be permanent or that the rate of decline must be accounted for. What makes this difficult though is monitoring illegal harvesting in remote areas, projecting future fire losses, or anticipating what climate temperatures will do to the ecological makeup of a forest. The project also needs to ensure that the carbon they sequester isn't increasing emissions elsewhere, meaning that the CO2 isn't leaking out. Finally, and perhaps the most difficult part, it is crucial for an offset project to prove that the forest protection wouldn't have happened otherwise. This can be very speculative to the point that natural conservancy agencies will justify an offsetting project on already protected property. This has happened so many times, and here is an example.
This is the project's planning document submitted in 2018 to the American Carbon Registry, and this is the baseline the project's built upon. That if it weren't for intervention, the forest would be subject to aggressive clear-cutting and high grading. The problem was, Hawk Mountain Preserve, as its name would suggest, was already a preserve. Since the 1930s, after the land was purchased by avid birder Rosalie Edge and the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary Association was set up, this area has been closely looked after, managed, and protected. The forest didn't need saving. It wasn't under threat, a fact borne out by the preserve's history and its own contemporary staff saying as much. Of course, if the forest wasn't under threat, then there wasn't much carbon dioxide here to save from entering the atmosphere, and thus, there wasn't many real carbon offsets.
And the thing is that internationally big companies such as Gucci, Disney, whatever you want to mention, they have bought into these credits. So then they go ahead and they tell their clients, hey, you can fly, you can buy my product, it's fine, you're not doing any harm on the planet. And that's fake news. And here is the funny catch. If you think I'm just some tech hippie complaining from my home, don't listen to me. Listen to the CEO of United Airlines.
Mankind produces 4,000 times as many emissions as we did in the pre-industrial era. And most of these carbon offset projects are about planting trees. There's not room on the planet to plant 4,000 times as many trees. It simply can't be the answer. And the problem with it is it's the easy solution. It's the solution that if you're sitting in the C-suite, you can write a check and check the box and have a marketing message that I've offset all my carbon, but you really haven't done anything. And
he's not wrong. Humanity is chopping down 15 billion trees per year, which is equivalent to almost 27 football fields per minute. Some other studies will say it's actually equals to 6 football fields per minute, but isn't that crazy? Even if it were just 1 football field per minute, that will count for 60 per hour and 1,140 per day, totaling over 500,000 football fields disappearing, vanishing from the earth on 1 year time. And we know the number is much higher, so Now, despite United's CEO comment, not even his company can give up on carbon credits. Because funny enough, even today, if you go to their website and you try to book a flight, you have the option to offset your footprint. Here it is. And I mean, just look at the background. It's a forest. Like, come on. So here is the deal. In theory, carbon credits are great. In practicality, they stink. Now, despite Kyoto, Paris, COP conferences, and all the technologies humanity is working on, gas emissions keep on the rise. So the world got a new plan. Net zero by 2050.
Net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050 means that instead of being honest this decade by taking this path, we leave the being honest part to the last minute by taking that path instead. As you can see, both lead to net zero in 2050, but they're very different journeys, because this path adds this many emissions to the atmosphere, and that one adds 3 times as much. And since emissions are what's causing the planet to warm, that means crossing the stop here or we're fucked point, which risks setting off irreversible chain reactions beyond our control.
I wonder if this is related to the amount of subsidies that go into the fuel industry nowadays.
I mean, doesn't this discourage investments in renewable energy?
I mean, wouldn't it be nice to just keep on enjoying our favorite pastime? Which, you know what I mean, right? Like, continuing living on this beautiful planet? I don't know. Is it just me? You tell me. We'll read you in the comments.
Now, remember, I have 3 tons of carbon dioxide to offset.